He came in pale. Some who were there remember a white raincoat, white shoes, a white plastic bag held tight in one fist. One of them remembers, instead, a worn tan Mac, the color of old sand. They cannot agree even on that. What they do agree on is the head, shaved smooth, and the eyebrows, gone, scraped away, so that the face had lost its punctuation, the small dark marks that tell us where a face begins. He had grown enormously heavy. He moved between the machines of the studio with the mild curiosity of a man inspecting a building he might once have lived in. And the men working those machines did not recognize him. They were, at that exact moment, conjuring him. His voice was not in the room, but his name was, written into every bar of the song coming through the monitors. They were mixing an elegy for a lost friend, calling his spirit up out of the speakers, and the spirit had let itself in. To feel the full weight of that afternoon, you have to know who the stranger had been. He was the one who named them. Before the megaliths and the laser pyramids, before any of it, a art school boy from Cambridge took two old bluesmen's names off a record sleeve and stitched them into something new. Pink Floyd. He wrote the first songs, the ones that shimmer and unsettle. He was the luminous one, the center of gravity, the face the cameras loved. And then, across barely 2 years, something came apart in him. Chemical or congenital or both. The kind of unmaking that has no clean cause and admits no cure. By early 1968, the others had quietly stopped collecting him for the shows. There was no announcement, no ceremony. One day the question was simply not asked. Shall we pick up Syd? No. His oldest Cambridge friend stepped into his place. The boy who had taught him guitar licks years before, now hired to replace him. The band lived. The founder was left behind, alone, in rooms with the curtains drawn. 7 years on, they built him a monument. It opens with a single sustained chord, a held breath. And then, out of that haze, 4 notes. 4 falling notes that the guitarist had stumbled onto almost by accident, and that the bassist found unbearably sad. He said they sounded like the man they had lost. And so the whole vast suite grew up around them, like a cathedral around a relic. Beneath it all lay the keyboard player's harmonic bed, the slow, weatherless chords that were always the true climate of this band's sound. The melody belonged to the absent founder. The harmony, the air it floated in, belonged to the quiet man at the keys. The melodic soul mourned by the harmonic soul. That is the architecture of the Requiem. And the words, when they come, are a litany of names for a man who can no longer answer to any of them. The song reaches out and calls him by all his lost identities at once. The dreamer, the painter, the player of pipes at the edge of dawn, the one shut away. It accuses him tenderly of having reached for the secret too early, of having cried out for something as far and cold as the moon. It begs the diamond to shine. It is the most loving thing the band ever made, and it is addressed to someone they believed could never hear it. He heard it. He stood in the room while it played. The guitarist noticed him first, a strange figure poking at the equipment, and busy, filed him away as some minor technician from the building. The keyboard player arrived, sat down beside the bassist, and for 10 long minutes thought nothing of the heavy bald man across the room. He assumed he was a friend of someone else's. Then the bassist leaned over and asked, quietly, "Do you know who that is?" "No idea," the keyboard player said. "Look again." He looked, and the floor opened. It was Syd, the bassist, the hard man, the future architect of so much controlled cruelty, later admitted, without dressing it up, that he was reduced to tears by the recognition of that large, ruined, vacant figure as the friend of his boyhood. This is where the legend stands, polished by retelling, the ghost who walked into his own funeral, the song that summoned what it grieved. It is almost too perfect, the uncanny in its purest form, Freud's word for the familiar made monstrous, the homely turned strange, the double who is and is not you. Here is a man who has become his own death mask, his own waxwork, a stranger wearing the rumor of a face you loved. They were singing Shine onto a memory, and the memory had grown a body and put on a raincoat and come to watch. But I promised you an autopsy, not a legend. And an autopsy means we open the thing up and look at what is actually inside. Even when what we find is that the body will not hold still, because the story does not survive contact with its own witnesses. Ask them how long he was there, and the answers scatter. An hour, says the drummer. No, 3 or 4 days, says someone else. The whole afternoon, says a third. Ask them what he wore, and the white coat turns tan, the immaculate turns shabby. Ask whether it was the day the guitarist married. For years, the tale fused the visit with the wedding, the ghost and the bride in a single, unbearable scene. And the guitarist himself, decades later, flatly denied that Syd had been at his wedding at all, while 3 of the guests swore on memory that they had seen him there, by the food, looking like a man who might sell you a burger at a roadside stand. Every detail you reach for comes away in your hand. What do we do with a legend that dissolves the moment we grip it? The lazy answer is to say the witnesses were unreliable, that time blurs everything, and move on. I think that is exactly wrong. I think the disagreement is the evidence. These were not careless men. They were obsessives, archivists of their own myth, who would later litigate over a name and a flying pig. If they cannot agree on the color of a coat, it is not because the afternoon was forgettable. It is because the afternoon was unbearable. And memory, when it touches something it cannot carry, does not record. It improvises. It builds a tomb over the wound and decorates the tomb. Each of them walked out of that room holding a different Syd because none of them could hold the real one. This is the deepest thing the episode has to teach. And it has nothing to do with rock and roll. We tell ourselves that memory is a recording and that the past is a fixed country we can revisit. It is not. Memory is a wound that keeps rewriting itself. And the parts we revise most are the parts that hurt the most. The contradictions in this story are not noise around the signal. They are the signal. They are the shape that guilt takes when it cannot speak its own name. 4 men, decades on, each insisting on a different version of the day they came face to face with what they had left behind in those darkened rooms. They had built him a diamond out of sound and begged it to shine, and the man himself walked in, heavier, balder, emptier than their elegy could ever admit, and stood among them as living proof that the song was a lie, or rather, that the song was the only truth they could bear, because the real truth had no eyebrows and carried a plastic bag. He left. He went back to the curtained rooms and stayed there, more or less, for years. They finished the record. It went around the world, and not one of them ever again managed to tell the same story twice. So I leave you with the question the contradictions force on us. When the people who were in the room cannot agree on what they saw, when the coat changes color and the days multiply and the wedding may or may not have happened, which version is the lie? The one they remember or the one they cannot? Where art does not console, it autopsies.